Hello and welcome to our presentation on helping Jamaican students transition in American schools. My name is Simone Green. I am a Jamaican-born educator. I am currently a science resource and choice coordinator for the International Baccalaureate program at Forest Park Elementary.
My name is Sherron Brown. I'm an Afro-Jamaican counselor educator. I completed my primary, secondary, and undergraduate education in Jamaica and my postgraduate education in the United States. Welcome.
I'm Abigail Cooper. I'm an African who was born in the United Kingdom. Spent my childhood in Jamaica, where I attended primary and secondary school before migrating to the United States to attend college.
For our presentation today, we have several people who are joining us. Welcome, Dr. Owen. She is a retired educator and currently an adjunct professor. Dr. Khan, who is an elementary educator, and Mrs. Coleman, who is the choice coordinator and also a school resource. Let's begin with our welcoming ritual. Please take a moment to view the picture on the screen. It's all about being kind to yourself. Self-compassion involves self-kindness and understanding that we are part of a common and imperfect humanity. How can practicing self-compassion help you as an educator? Would anyone like to share? Dr. Khan, thank you. Please turn your mic on.
Sorry about that. We have to practice forgiveness if we must stop punishing ourselves for the mistakes that we make.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I agree.
We must be open to criticism, both of ourselves, first of ourselves and then others.
Yes, I feel like that's important as well. If we can accept criticism, then we'll be more open-minded about receiving information from others about ourselves or about our teaching. Thank you. All right, today's session is going to focus on Jamaica's social, historical, political events, cultural practices, norms, and more that can be utilized to understand and demystify the Jamaican child in the classroom setting. We will take a short look at the history of Jamaica and the education system, reasons that Jamaicans migrate to the United States and other countries as well, and creating a culturally responsive whole school climate, some factors that affect behavior and what we can do to mediate those behaviors, and how we can celebrate diversity.
With regard to the historical and cultural context that the Jamaican child brings to the American classroom, the Jamaican immigrant child that is brings to the American classroom in our schools, educators need to be cognizant that Jamaican children arrive in our schools from rich and diverse cultural and historical contexts. This informs their self-perception and provides a strong sense of self that we see them portray on a daily basis. They have a sense of their place in history and their place in the world as influenced by their ancestors, influenced by their national heroes, and also by the nation builders. So Jamaican children from an early age, basic school, which we refer to, which is referred to here as preschool, learn about their history. They learn about the indigenous people who were living in what they called Jamaica when Columbus first came in 1494. These were the Taino or Arawak people who came in contact with the Spaniards. Jamaican people learn a sense of justice from them because they learned that these people died because of genocide, because of mistreatment, the atrocities that were inflicted on them by the Spaniards. And so the students are aware of that background. Then the Jamaican students learn about the British coming in and in 1655 and conquering Jamaica from the Spaniards, and the Spaniards leaving their African servants who took to the hills and intermarried with the Taino or the Arawaks. So Jamaican people come with a sense of what their history is. And so we found that once the British came in, then the Jamaican children come to the table with this historical knowledge that once the British came to Jamaica, then plantation, they created a plantation system whereby Africans were brought to Jamaica via the triangular slave trade route, where they left England, went to Africa with trade goods, took slaves from Africa, brought them to the Caribbean, to Jamaica, as one of the Caribbean islands, and then went back to England with goods from Jamaica, rum, sugar, and tobacco, indigo, and other resources. Now, when the Jamaican children come to the table, they understand that a strong sense of history informs who they are. So from those people came the African slaves who fought for freedom, fought to be emancipated. There were several slave revolts in Jamaica, in Easter by Chief Tacky, in Christmas by Sam Shaw. And so Jamaican people fought, Jamaican slaves fought for independence, fought for emancipation. And on August 1st, 1838, that was achieved. And so before that was achieved in 1834, there was an apprenticeship system whereby it was supposed to be teaching the slaves how they could handle freedom. Of course, there's a serious tension there between those 4 years between apprenticeship and emancipation, because of course the Jamaican slaves wanted freedom and the planters wanted slavery. After which there were set up free villages for people who wanted to move. I'm a product of a free village. People who wanted to not stay in the plantation after slavery, they went into these villages and they formed their own communities. Others who stayed back on the plantation worked for menial wages. So after the free village system, then the population began to expand. And so when we became a nation of mostly Afro-Caribbean people, Afro-Jamaicans, the Maroons came about because once the Spaniards had left their servants, their African servants, they took to the hills and they intermarried with the Tainos. And so when the British came and settled Port Royal as a port for pirates, they weren't starting with the plantation system yet. Then at that point, the British looked at the system and realized that they could thrive with agriculture. So then agriculture became the mainstay and sugar became king. So after slavery, when all of the insurrection and all of the people who decided that they wanted to help, like the Quakers and the abolitionists, then slavery finally was ended. But the new society struggled to become a nation, struggled. And so when the plantation started dying, there came people from India and China as indentured servants, indentured laborers who worked at menial costs so that they could keep the plantation system running. And so also people who came to Jamaica who were not coming for labor, but running from religious persecution were people from the Middle East, Syrians and Lebanese, and also South American Jews fleeing religious persecution to come to a British state where they could get protection. And so that informed our cuisine. And my panelists will be able to talk about cuisine that is influenced by, for example, India. And our curry, our dal curry, that's strong Indian influence. Our Chinese food, strong influence. We have influence in our religion. We have our kumina, our pakamina, those are our African ancestors. We have our religion. We have so many different, we have Catholicism, we have the Church of England, we have every denomination from the Protestants, and we have our Rastafarianism, we have so many religions. We are a mixture of people. And also our education being informed by the British as well as the African, because we know that the first university was in Timbuktu in Africa. So the Jamaican child comes to the table knowing that, and that also informs our cultural norms, our mores, our practices. Jamaican people are fiercely possessive about land and property, because when you come to a country with nothing, even your clothes are owned by your oppressors, then you want to own something for yourself. So once Jamaicans were able to, and you see that informs wherever we travel, we want to own. So these children come with that sense of who they are. Our value system, family, closeness in family, respect for elders, education is key, a key form of our culture. Also educating girls, which is not in keeping with the British where the males were educated, but in Jamaica, girls are favored for education. Courage, confidence, immigration and travel. We have what we call wanderlust. Jamaicans move around. Our work ethic, we have a strong work ethic. It is said that Jamaicans among all immigrants believe in the American dream, believe that hard work can get you to give you a sense of social mobility. We believe in human rights, as is seen with all the slave revolts. And of course, we're one of the most hospitable people. Hospitality is key. So these are what informs the child that you see in front of you. And so once the society started struggling, then Jamaica decided, through all of what was going on in the world at the time, that there was a chance for us to become an independent nation. Marcus Garvey came in the 1920s as a Pan-Africanist, saying that Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, that as Africans, we all have the same destiny. Then in the 1930s, Norman Manley and Alexander Bustamante, they are the ones who started the trade unions and started the country moving towards independence. And of course, when the country became independent, these people were our national heroes. Many of the Maroons who fought guerrilla warfare against the British and forced them to make a treaty. Sam Sharp with his Christmas Day Rebellion, and Paul Bogle in the post-emancipation era, when he saw the atrocities, when he saw how the social system was so broken down and people were disenfranchised, the poor blacks. He walked all the way from Morant Bay to Spanish Town, which was the then capital, to petition the then Governor Eyre to say, this is wrong. We need social structures. We need schools. We need everything for our people. And so, of course, he was hung. And so was George William Gordon, was said to be a collaborator with him in starting an insurrection and trying to overthrow the British system that was there. So Jamaican children learn this at an early age. They acted out in schools. We celebrate National Heroes Day. We celebrate Independence Day. We celebrate Emancipation Day. So the children come with a rich cultural history of who they are. And they have a sense of their background and have a sense of who they are in the world. So when Jamaica became independent, 2 years after the independence, the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica, invited Dr. King to be the commencement speaker in 1965. And he aptly spoke about facing the challenges of a new age. And Dr. King was able to speak on the fact that he's never felt more as a human than when he was in Jamaica, because he said, here are people of Jewish extraction, there are Europeans, there are Africans, there are Chinese and Indians, but they don't identify by their ethnicity, they identify by the country. They say, we are Jamaicans. And he said he wanted that to be what it would be for America, where everybody would identify as American. And I am sure that wherever you go, if you see a Jamaican, whether they're Chinese, whether they're European extraction, whether they're African, they will all identify Jamaican. We have a strong sense of who we are as a country and as a people. And that's the child that you will have in front of you.
The Jamaican education system is modeled after the British system. Jamaica was once a colony of Great Britain and is now a commonwealth. The system consists of primary and secondary institutions. Primary school begins at the age of 3. Students are expected to have foundational knowledge of reading and math skills when they enter public school. Beginning in grades 1 through 6, students in public or private schools have an integrated curriculum that focuses on language arts, basic mathematics, social studies, and science. As they go up the ladder in grades 4 through 6, students' curriculum is expanded to include language arts, mathematics, music, physical education, religion, science, social studies, sewing, including embroidery, home economics, and agriculture. Because at the end of grade 6, students take an exam that determines if they're eligible to move on to secondary education. Once there, secondary education is divided into a lower and upper section. The lower section consists of grades 7 through 9, also called forms 1 to 3. Upper secondary consists of grades 10 to 11, known as forms 4 to 5. Forms 4 to 5 are designed to prepare students for the external Caribbean secondary education certificate. Here, these pictures show the uniform system in Jamaica. The secondary schools are either co-ed or single gender, whereas primary are all co-ed. Each school is identified by the uniform they wear and the colors. On this slide, you'll see here both primary and secondary classrooms. In the primary setting on the right, students share a desk and the class size is much larger, whereas in the secondary setting, students are in a small group engaged in a science activity. So as you can see, Jamaicans have a very rich history, and their education system begins to prepare students from a very early age. As students progress through the education system and wish to further their education, this may prompt or help them to decide to migrate to another country in order to complete their studies. Others may have earned a scholarship for academics or athletics and choose to migrate for that reason. Some migrate to reunify or reconnect with family members who previously migrated to America, while others migrate because of their socioeconomic status. Jamaicans leave home searching for employment opportunities that will help their families back home. Once those students arrive in the U.S., a plan is needed to help with the transitioning process. We as educators are constantly thinking about how we can welcome and embrace Jamaican culture into our schools. Our end goal is to help students to acculturate, to continue to hold on or embrace their own culture, values, and beliefs, while at the same time embracing their new host culture. As educators who teach students of varying diversity, we must grow with diversity as it grows in our classrooms. This is best practice if we want to reach and teach our students to be successful. Some transition pieces we can have in place. We can form a welcoming committee, set up our classrooms with elements of culture, assign a classroom greeter, have someone there to welcome those new students at the door, create opportunities for students to share their cultural background, engage them in discussions about culture. A really great practice to have in place is to have a buddy system where students are assigned to a buddy to help them so that they are aware of the new norms in their school environment. This is very important as this system helps with socialization skills, and this is a very important part of the learning process. Earlier, I mentioned that as diversity grows within our classrooms, then we as educators must also grow with diversity. To begin that growth, we need to build trust. We need to engage in personal culture. As educators, we need to grow and build our cultural competence. We need to create authentic and effective relationships through professional development. If there are any issues, we need to confront those issues of social dominance and social injustice. Jamaican students should not be treated the same as other migrant students. We need to look at what they bring to the table so that we can provide the differentiated support that they need to meet their needs. As educators and leaders, we need to transform our instructional practices. We need to examine our pedagogy and our curriculum. We need to look at how we interact with students who are transitioning into our school community. If you have limits, acknowledge those limits. Become co-learners with your colleagues to transform your classroom and continue with professional development as needed. We also need to engage the entire school community, including all stakeholders, not just within our immediate school family, but on the outside as well. Anyone who comes in contact with any students, whether they are transitioning or not, should also be taught how to grow with diversity.
At this point, I wanted to see if some of our audience would want to make some comments as to what they observe with Jamaican students in their classrooms.
I do have a couple of questions. Can everyone hear me?
Sure, Doctor.
There was some discussion about the transition and the diversity as it relates to the Jamaican students. And as a teacher, I know that a welcoming environment that celebrates cultures and creates a strong foundation, it can create a strong foundation for relationships, as well as identifying and addressing different challenges. So as a teacher advocate, how would I create this welcoming environment with stakeholders in the school building? I understand that this is a concern and this is an issue, and pretty much knowing how to handle it in my classroom, but sometimes as it relates to stakeholders, it's hard to break through. So how would I handle that as an advocate for my Jamaican students?
For this one, for this to really happen, you have to have buy-in from the very top. When you have buy-in from the very top, then you have support. You have support of embracing not just Jamaican culture or Jamaican students that are coming to your school, but students from any cultural background. Having ongoing PD where it's inclusive, not just of the classroom teachers, but anyone who comes in contact with students throughout the day, and also other stakeholders too. It's not just your school, your immediate school community. It's anyone, a volunteer that's coming in, a community member that's coming in, officers that are involved, or city council members that are involved in your school. It's all stakeholders. And when your staff, your school community sees that, hey, okay, the people who are touching our kids from the outside are involved too, it makes them want to do that a little bit more. In regards to setting up a classroom where it's culturally embracing, a lot of times, and I've witnessed this, a lot of times you'll see we have artifacts out, we have things out, but we never address those artifacts or those posters or those items that we have placed in our classroom. An easy way to, share that culture is to actually use the things that you have placed in your classroom. And it's not that we're stopping every single day to necessarily point out something about someone's culture. It's something that's woven in. Students will know that if their teacher is welcoming to them, they'll know if they're accepted in the classroom. Right? So it's watching your tone. It's watching the words that you use with your students. It's treating those children, right, how you would want to be treated if you went to another country. So, there's lots of pieces that we have to add in to create that climate or that environment. And it's not something that's done in one day. It's something that it's over time. You have to build it, you have to grow it. That's why it's called growing with diversity, to embrace different cultures.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, just to continue with what Simone said, say, for instance, you have a new student from Jamaica in your classroom, and the student might be exhibiting behaviors that you're not quite sure how to deal with. And you might have a custodian or a media specialist, or the nurse might be from Jamaica. And I'm not from Jamaica. I'm a teacher who's not from Jamaica. So I can have a simple conversation with the stakeholder and say, hey, I just received a new student in my class. Can you tell me or share some of the norms or some of the, the culture of your island that I could better be able to connect with the student and build a trust and relationship with the student. So just a simple conversation with any stakeholder on campus who you might be aware is from that particular island could be a great resource, a wealth of resource to share some insights and some of the norms. And I know Sherron will touch on this next with the behaviors that are exhibited. Something as simple as close proximity. A student in Jamaica is taught not to stand very close to an adult. It's considered disrespectful. But here in the United States, it's a complete opposite. If the student is standing away, the teacher will say, come closer, come closer. But then the student is taught in Jamaica, that's being disrespectful to your elders or to an adult. So some common norms that we have in Jamaica that might be different or the complete opposite here. Or coming close to someone's face, and that's considered disrespectful. So just understanding some of our norms and the culture, and that we're taught formal English, that patois is just our dialect, which is spoken not formally, it's not taught in schools. And it's a way of us communicating with our close friends and families. So simple conversations with any stakeholder who might be from that island could be a great resource to the classroom.
Dr. Owen, I saw you unmuted your camera. I thought you wanted
Yes.
Did you
I
want
want to say that Jamaican children have great respect for authority. So what's the role of the teacher in that case? Okay. Therefore, the teacher has to know some form of history about the student. What if you're in a school and there are no other island people, Jamaican people? I would have to go and research. If I want to be an effective teacher, teach my kids to succeed, I would have to do some research where they're coming from. You know, the background, family life, and things of the sort to sort of make some kind of connection with the child. And as we're talking, I thought of somebody said something about projects, I think. A great project is have the kids, have everybody in the class, both Jamaicans and others, choose a country and do a project on the country. And so the Jamaican child will get an opportunity to talk about Jamaica. And there again, the teacher and other students can learn something more about Jamaicans. And then there'll be a sort of comfort level in the classroom.
Absolutely. I agree.
So, you know, they have that has to do with the sharing of the, you know, have to share the culture. We have to also remember that Jamaican children are well rounded, and we have seen that in the different subjects that they learn in school, especially, you know, sewing and knitting and all that kind of stuff. They are well rounded. It's not just reading, writing, and math that they do. They do other things. Agriculture, boys do agriculture, girls do sewing and cooking. So that's very important for the teacher to know. in order for these kids to be successful in the schoolwork.
Thank you. Dr. Khan, I saw you unmuted again. Did you have another comment?
Not necessarily a comment. Different types of anxiety and stressors that can affect students socially and emotionally. I've heard a lot of good information, stuff that I wasn't really aware of. These things can lead to bullying. I had a situation in my classroom where there was an issue about dialect, how the students talk. You know, there's a difference between how we speak in this country versus the broken English or the patois, I think is what we call it. So there was some bullying going on due to this. But like Dr. Owen was saying, if the teacher doesn't know, if they're not trained, and Ms. Green and Ms. Cooper also mentioned, I believe, PD, professional developments are important, because of some of the things that I've just heard as far as the child standing far away from the teacher, not coming close, that could be disrespectful. I wasn't aware of that, because I will tell the child to come a little closer so I could, you know, come closer. I won't bite. That was something that I wasn't aware of. And if teachers are not, if they're not cognizant of what that background is, that could just be a classroom of disaster. You know, the child is feeling not welcome because we don't know how to approach them. We don't know how to address their issues. We don't know how to communicate with them. So a lot of times the children are coming in, not only from Jamaica, but other places, other countries, and they're experiencing the anxiety, the different stressors, and we're not equipped to address these stressors. The anxiety that the children are having. Oh, they'll be fine, just leave it. You know, call a parent. You know, just being insensitive about how the child is feeling and what they're going through. And it starts from the top. It has to come from the top. The administrators have to be school. They also have to go through PDs and understand the different cultures and what they bring to the table and how we need to address it and make them feel more comfortable in their classroom environment, because this can affect academics. If the child feels that there's no relationship with the parent or with the teacher, then that could be a great detour for the child as far as them progressing academically.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. You segued nicely into what I have to talk about. You talked about the stressors that the students incur from just being transitioning from one country to another. So it's important for us to know of some of the norms or some of the things that may inform the student having maybe stress in the classroom situation. For example, a student may come to school and not being able to learn, maybe not focusing, and the teacher may try to wonder what it is, but the teacher does not understand that in the home, privacy is a value system. So Jamaican parents may say to their children, you do not take out anything that happens in this house and tell it to a stranger. That in itself may incur stress. There is a certain resistance also to counseling that may occur because of this, because the child is prohibited from talking to a stranger about something that may be happening. So Jamaican parents like to look at things, even if the teacher say, oh, I don't know, Mom, can you come in for a conference? There's something wrong with little Johnny. Something is wrong, I can tell. The mom may say, oh, I'm going to take him to the doctor. He may have a medical problem, or I'll talk to my pastor about it. So if the teacher understands the child in that context, then the teacher may be able to realize that, hey, if I can get to, as Dr. Owen says, Jamaican people, they have a respect for authority. So if the teacher as an authority figure can get to form a relationship with that parent, a relationship to say, hey, I think this is in order. I think your child needs to talk to the school counselor, and explain that the school counseling is not trying to find out what your business is, but to help your child to adjust. So family dynamics also very important for you to understand that the Jamaican child cannot be looked at in the counseling situation outside of the family system, because in the Jamaican family, there is a closeness that occurs within the family that we have to understand, because it informs who the child is. And in this country, there is a word called enmeshment in counseling that it seems to be maladaptive, but in the Jamaican sense, it is adaptive. Jamaican people are enmeshed in the form that if something is happening, if Johnny is topping the class, then everybody in the family system is gonna know. Cousin in England, auntie in Germany, everybody will know. And the reverse is true. If the child is having problems in school, if the child is making poor choices, then everybody will know, and everybody will come to the table and want to talk about how to fix it. So the child cannot be seen outside of the family system. Another thing that incurs stress in the child is just the immigration process, the unfamiliarity with blood relatives. Sometimes a child may not have seen mom in, probably never seen, doesn't remember what mom looks like. Mom left when the child was 2. The child is here with mom at 13. But the child doesn't have a bond with mom. That incurs stress. The child is criticized at home by mom because of the accent. Oh, I don't like the way you talk. You don't sound like the other kids. And here is this woman who is a blood relative, but a stranger, stressed at home. Then the child comes to school and the child is being ridiculed for the accent again. So the child has no safe space. So that informs also the counseling situation. So also in the school system, a child may leave from a school in deep rural St. Catherine, as I am from, and with a school of 200 kids, and end up in a school of 1,500, 2,000 kids. And that child does not, the culture shock is so great that also negatively impacts the child's learning and the child's adjustment in the school. So the social emotional is key, because if the child is not performing at an optimal level in the social emotional realm, then the academics and everything else is going to suffer. Also, what works? We will see that there are certain counseling strategies that are culturally specific that will help the child to acculturate in the new environment, to learn to love the culture that they're coming from, that rich Jamaican culture, and still being able to perform at an optimal manner in the new culture, in the host culture, by embracing all that they need to thrive in the host culture. So because the Jamaicans believe in doctors and teachers and they respect them, then the therapy can come from that end, knowing that the parent will say, okay, this is a professional, and I think that I will be able to take my child to that professional to get that help. So one counseling tool that the counselor can use is the acculturative scale. And the acculturative scale shows you what level on the scale the child forms. For example, not every child who immigrates from Jamaica is on the same level of the scale. There are some kids who travel to Miami every weekend. There are some kids who go to New York every summer. There are kids who travel all the time. And so they're more Americanized, and they easily acculturate. And there are kids who come from a system where the parents are, I don't want you eating any of that American food. I don't want you talking like them. So that is a system, there is separation where the parent believes that my culture is not going to be mixing with that culture. And there are those who may dabble in the culture and go back and forth, or there are some who want total assimilation. I want to speak American, I want to eat American, I want nothing to do with the Jamaican culture. And if you use this tool to find where the child is on the acculturation scale, then you're able to meet the child's needs. And of course, acculturation is what we aim for, to value your culture and also being able to embrace all that the host culture brings with it. Another culturally specific tool is Genogram. The genogram, as I said, sometimes kids come to the table and the mother is not the person who they connect with. The genogram is like a family tree, but it shows you the dyads and the triads in the family, the people who are close. Maybe the child is close to an aunt, or the child may have migrated with a cousin and they grew up like brothers and sisters. And so they are the close ones. And so you find that sometimes there are little dyads over here and they're against the mother there because she's trying to make them Americanized and they are resistant. And so the genogram helps you to see who are the heads of the families. Is there alcoholism in the family? Is there tension in the family? Who are the people that are the ones that you could reach out to support the child in the family? So these are some culturally specific tools that would help to inform the counselor or even a teacher who's working with the child who is newly immigrated from Jamaica, to see where they are, what can you do to help them to succeed and to develop social, emotionally, and in the academic realm.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for sharing some useful tools that will assist our students in transitioning successfully. Now we're going to focus on celebrating diversity through the use of text. Let's take a look at the image on the page. Many of you might already be familiar with this image as it has been used in district PDs to show the representation of diversity in children's text. As you can see, the representation of some cultures are not even listed. And because of this, it's so urgent, it's so imperative that as educators, we find text that is inclusive of the cultures represented in our classrooms. Books have the potential to make a meaningful difference in the lives of readers, and that is why it is important that students of Jamaican culture see themselves represented in their reading materials, especially those students who have migrated to the United States and are in the process of cultural transition. The next few slides have several texts that represent Jamaican trailblazers and history makers. A diverse book can help students to understand what it's like for people who don't share their same history or their ethnicity or their religion or maybe their socioeconomic status. Diverse books are able to teach children how to empathize and be open-minded to learning more about others. When kids see themselves on a page or when they see others on a page, that builds interest. And this can lead to acceptance. It also brings home the idea that they too can be seen on the pages of a book. Some of the books on this slide focus on folk tales and oral stories that have traveled down through time and have been compiled here for students and children of Jamaican culture to see. And maybe they've not heard these stories. And for those students that this is not their culture, by reading these texts, they can be able to compare and say, hey, we have similar stories too from my culture. As we continue, we see that there are other ways that we can celebrate diversity. We can look for ways to integrate cultural traditions throughout our school and within our classrooms. We can incorporate books with multicultural themes and different perspectives into our reading material. We can explore themes that are common to all cultures. We can integrate art, music, etc. into our classroom activities and content that we teach. And we can highlight multicultural holidays appropriately. It's very important that we celebrate diversity. And this shows students that not only are we celebrating them, but we accept them. And this is going to be a huge piece in helping students transition. If they are comfortable, they are going to be more willing to learn and more ready to participate and engage in their own learning. As we near the end of our presentation, let's stop for a moment and take a look at an adult educator who transitioned as a young Jamaican.
Hello, I'm Abigail Cooper. Today, I have with me my colleague, Mr. Wagstaff, who will be sharing his experiences as a youngster who migrated from Jamaica to the United States. Hello, Mr. Wagstaff, and welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Again, like Ms. Cooper stated, I'm Sherron Wagstaff. I'm a teacher at Emerald Cove Middle School. And like she stated, I'm going to share my experience as a migrant from Jamaica. I'm going to start off by saying this. At around 10 years old, I passed the common entrance, which is an entrance exam to high school. They have a different name for it today. But I passed high enough to actually attend a prestigious high school in Montego Bay, Jamaica. It's called Cornwall College. It was a wonderful school. Matter of fact, possibly the highlight of my entire life. It was a wonderful experience going to that particular school. Now, I only spent 2 years at that particular high school because I knew that eventually I would be coming to the United States because my mom was already here. My mom was a teacher in Jamaica, but she left to make a better life for myself as well as my two brothers in the United States. So for a few years, we lived with our aunt, who was also a teacher, and she basically molded us and shaped us into what we eventually would become later on. So moving forward, I was at Cornwall for 2 years, and around 13 years old, we had the opportunity to actually migrate to the United States. Now, when we arrived, my first experience arriving in the United States was I was just startled and amazed at all the lights that I actually saw flying over Miami, Florida. It was just a tremendous experience. Maybe that experience was part of the fact that I've never been into an airplane before. So that in itself was exciting.
Okay.
Now, around that time, it was August, it was summer. So schools were on break, and my brothers and I spent a lot of time playing around, playing Nintendo games and having a lot of fun before school started in the fall. In the fall, my younger brother, he attended an elementary school. My middle brother, he attended a middle school. At that time, I think the name of the school was Beer Middle. And I passed high enough to actually go to high school. I actually attended Plantation High School. My first experience when I arrived at the school I was shell-shocked. It was really amazing what I actually saw. The school was enormous compared to Cornwall College in Jamaica that I came from. It was just a massive school. It was extremely large. At 14 years old at that time, I just thought it was large. Maybe today it was like, oh, it's not that large at all. Population of the school possibly was around 2,000 compared to in Jamaica, Cornwall College, population maybe 800 students, maybe 1,000. So it was a vast difference. Now, my first day at the school was, needless to say, a shocker. Just imagine at 14 years old, you leave your country of birth, where you're accustomed to seeing a lot of Black people roaming around. Not to say that we don't have different ethnic groups. We do in Jamaica. But just to come to the United States where you're surrounded by, at this school, predominantly white kids. The Plantation High School possibly at that time was maybe 95% white, maybe 2 or 3% Black, and then the other. And it was just amazing to me to actually see so many white students at once. Another shocker for me was at lunchtime, I often would take the time to go to the outside of the auditorium. And I sat with some of my Jamaican friends on the steps of the auditorium. And I would actually see kids driving to school. That was unheard of. I was like, what's going on? That we have kids who are actually driving to school. I never experienced that growing up in Jamaica at that time. So that was an experience for me right there. Now, moving forward, my experience going to the high school, I will never forget. I was bullied. Looking back at it now, I could actually say I was actually bullied a lot. I did not fit in. I tried to fit in. I tried desperately to fit in with other kids, and especially African-American kids, since they look just like me. I figure, okay, it would be easier for me to assimilate into the population by basically making friends with Black kids, with Black American kids. It never happened. They shunned Jamaican students at that time.
Mhm.
I had no idea why at that time, but later on, with having conversations with my mom and my aunts and so forth, we would later find out that a lot of African Americans at that time felt threatened by Jamaicans. In their eyes, Jamaicans were here to take their jobs, and that wasn't even the case. I just wanted to have a friend at the school, to feel a part of a team, a part of a family. And that wasn't the case at that particular school. Matter of fact, I was more of a friends with white students than I was with Black students, which was unusual for me, coming from a culture where it's all Black, mostly Blacks, and you can easily associate and talk and just basically be a part of a family there.
Mhm.
Now, I had one really terrible experience in a PE class. I was in a PE class this particular day, and the PE teacher, he was talking about the influx of drugs into the United States, into Florida at that point. And he made reference to the fact that a lot of the marijuana, or ganja, as some people call it in Jamaica, comes directly from Jamaica. So he made reference to, like, okay, a lot of this drugs, like marijuana, comes directly from Jamaica, and those Jamaican students over there are part of the problem. And just imagine at 14 years old to hear a teacher actually make a statement like that, or a reference like that, and you're new to the country, and now I already can't fit in with students, and now a teacher is saying this. Now the students are really staring at me, and it was just embarrassing at that point. Now, later on, like I mentioned, I think I was being bullied a lot. Kids would jeer when the Jamaican kids passed by, especially myself. At that time, Michael Jackson was my favorite singer, and I just wanted to be like Michael Jackson. So I had S curl, long S curl, and so forth. So kids would actually make fun of that. Both Black and white kids would make fun of that. And I'll never forget my experiences walking to the cafeteria, because in walking to the cafeteria, there was a corridor, and on both sides, you would have students just sitting there. And as you walk, they would just make fun of the kids passing by, especially the Jamaican students. So in the 4 years I actually went to that school, Plantation High, I don't even think I went to the cafeteria more than 10 times.
Oh, wow.
In the entire 4 years at the school, because I was so scared. I didn't feel as part of a team. The experience I had there is completely different from the experience I had in Jamaica. Growing up in Jamaica, it's like I mentioned, that's where I grew up. That's where I was born. So it was easy to fit in. It was more difficult to fit in here. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be a part of a family. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel appreciated and so forth. I wanted students to talk to me, to make me feel at home to a certain extent. Now, the experience I had then, later on, I became a teacher, and I'm currently a teacher at Emerald Cove Middle School with Miss Cooper. And part of our culture at the school, we have what we call Monday Matters lessons, and the social emotional learning is part of this part of the Mondays Matters lesson, where we try to teach our students to make sure you're welcoming to other students. You never ever know what someone is feeling at that point. Similar to myself, I would sit in the cafeteria by myself at that point. I would just make friends with the other Jamaican students. I remember clearly just staying by the art room. I love to draw, so we just hang out by the art room, and all the Jamaican students will just talk about Jamaica, how we miss Jamaica and so forth. Wish we could go back because of our experiences here. So at our school, Emerald Cove, we try to teach the students, hey, if someone is sitting in the cafeteria by themselves or in the library or media center by themselves, go over and introduce yourself. Let that student feel a part of a team, feel like a part of a family, because you just never ever know the impact you'll have on a student life by basically saying, hey, how you doing today? I wish I had that. I never had that experience at all. And I was longing for that experience. So I can just imagine what other students go through, whether it be they're from a Caribbean island or from a South American country. Just being new to a particular culture, it's a shell shock. It's just a culture shock, period. It's something that most people who are born here, if not all individuals who are born here, could never, ever imagine or even experience, because you're just born here. And a lot of people often say you have to walk in someone's shoes to actually understand exactly what they're going through. Well, I went through it, and I could just imagine what other students go through when they experience that. Now, I'm not actually here to say that all my experiences at the high school was terrible, because for the most part, whether it be the Jamaican school, Cornwall College, or the school in the United States, the teachers wanted the best for us. I had wonderful teachers at both schools. Right. They both wanted us to learn. They both stressed the importance of getting a good education, an education that will be impactful later on, an education that will take you further than you could ever dream. And that's part of the reason why my mom came here. She wanted us to move further and beyond what she could actually give to us or experience for us in Jamaica. So both schools had teachers that were driven to make sure we succeed at everything that we put our mind to. So those were the great similarities. Now, differences, the only difference I could actually say with both schools or both was the fact that it's just to fit in, just to fit into a new culture. It was easier to fit into the Jamaican culture because I was born there. I knew the culture, I knew the kids. It was easy for me to assimilate. But just coming here, it was more difficult for me to get along. It was difficult for me to make friends. I was shunned. So that was the only difference in both the cultures or both the schools per se.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Wagstaff, for your story and for sharing your experiences.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for having me.
That brings us to the end of our presentation. And before we close out, does anyone have anything that they would like to contribute?
I see a bubble, a speech bubble. It says, I am feeling so hopeful after this presentation. Excellent, excellent information. A lot of great information that I have received that I can take back, not only to my classroom, but also to the school, the entire body, and have conversations about it.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think this was excellent. Teachers continue or start to use this kind of information. We think we'll have the kids with number one, they will feel more comfortable in the classroom. Number two, they will be successful. And they won't have to bother about, we know that when kids from Jamaica come here, they pronounce words differently, some words, and they spell some words differently.
That's true.
And I've seen cases where the teacher said, that's wrong, wrong, wrong. We don't do that. That's not how we pronounce the word. That's not how we spell the word, which is, yes, there are two different spelling. If you are in England or you're in Jamaica, you can spell program this way. In America, this is how we spell program. But not totally tell a child it's totally wrong. You can't do that. So this was very enlightening.
Thank you for sharing how you're feeling about our presentation. We have some resources here that we pulled to collect information from to support the information that we did share with you all. And so if you would like to read any of the articles, those resources are available here for you. And then of course, our contact information is also available if you would like to reach out to ask any further questions.